I know we've talked about that use case before with the intelligence sector, and I find it just fascinating the kinds of things that you're doing. But just to make it real for our audience, this is a case where you were using fictitious data, not real world data, but synthetic data to try to figure out who had killed the confidential informant in the Middle East and why they were killed. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah, that's right. So the case study was effectively three questions you'd have to answer across this data environment. And one was who killed our confidential informant, whether or not that person was the person who acted on it or just financed it, and whether or not there was a secondary attack being planned as part of this data set. And ultimately, that's not a trivial task. Connecting these things and understanding inherently how one thing influences the other is pretty hard to ascertain. That work is not easy work. For us, it was about really testing the limitations of the system and trying to understand what we could generate out of these systems. And so we really wanted to understand a couple of things: how easily we can ingest information, load information, and connect information of different types. The second thing we really wanted to understand is how effectively we could use context to enrich some of the connections and the relationships between this information, and ultimately what that meant for our ability to recall and use that as context, and really sort of just general awareness for how we answered questions. Then we wanted to really understand how effective the fact-based reasoning methods were. I mean, obviously, we thought we had a high reliability system, and the efficacy rates on the returns are quite good, but how good, we don't know. So we wanted to really determine whether or not we could do that. And then at the end of the day, using the combination of all of these things to really deploy autonomous reasoning agents at scale across this data model, and trying to really reason at a superhuman level. I mean, just taking it back to what I said before, we didn't really know what the answer to that would be whenever we got started with this use case. Solving something in about 2% of the time it normally takes to better than 100% resolution was a bit of an eye-opener for us. And so that use case in and of itself is very, very interesting because it's allowed us to really iterate on how we structure data, how we test data, how we deem relevancy, and ultimately what that means for the sort of superhuman capability to reason in really incredible ways. It really is quite impressive.
I agree with you. Every time you talk about it, I'm just kind of amazed at what you can do with technology and what seems to be kind of a non-technology problem. It seems to be much more of a human problem.
Next on the agenda today, we have Jon Brewton, founder and CEO at Data², and John Stegeman, product specialist at Neo4j. They'll be discussing the best path for taking Gen AI from pilot to scalable, production-ready applications.
You talked a little bit about the fact that you're using Neo4j and that you're using generative AI kind of technologies, and those are two technologies that our audience is super interested to hear about. So maybe could you dive into that a little bit? So what part does Neo4j play in that platform? What part does generative AI play in that platform? And maybe expound on that just a little bit.
Yeah, in general, I'll kind of go back to where we started. These tools were quite new a year ago when we got together, the other co-founders and myself, and said, hey, let's see what we can do with some of this new tooling. What does that mean for our ability to derive new insights and connect new things? We had some background with knowledge graphs in the past. One of our co-founders, Jeff Dalglish, our chief technology officer, was one of the original members of Mono, which was a knowledge graph company. Not too dissimilar, at least from a graph database management system perspective, to Neo4j. That's the ground they were trying to cut. They were energy specific. And I've kind of worked on both sides of that equation. So it was really trying to take what we already knew was a fundamental advantage in how you can actually store and connect information in the graphical sort of structure, and try to see if we could leverage these new tools in a certain way to derive new insights. And I think one of the bigger things that we really tried to do was find a partner to help us. We needed to find a way to do something slightly different. Relational databases and triple stores just couldn't handle the complexity and scale required on what we would like to do from an oil and gas perspective, or just in general information fidelity perspective. So we needed a solution that could seamlessly integrate and help us enable us to analyze different data types. And that's ultimately how we found Neo4j. Now, from a Gen AI perspective, like what we're doing is we're using commercially available technologies to really help us find the right solutions. I think what sets Data² apart from other Gen AI solution providers is really the fact that we're not grounded to a single LLM. We're not grounded to a single technology. We're not grounded to an approach. What we really tried to do is take the best features and the best tooling available from various platforms and create a system that's interconnected across this landscape to really deliver very specific and unique capabilities and competencies. So our flexible architecture approach really helps enable our ability to be agile and to derive the right insights from the right systems at the right time. We routinely test some of these systems to see which ones are generating the best answers, which ones respond to the best context, which ones generate the best outcomes based on the data types themselves. And I think taking that approach really opens up the aperture for us to be applied in a significantly meaningful way, regardless of your data environment and what you're doing. But just to go back to one of the things that you said, like Neo4j has been an incredible partner for us. They really have been a thought partner. Their graph database technology provides flexible and scalable infrastructure, allows us to model really complex relationships. And I think the bigger thing for us outside of some of the technical enablement is just the relationships that we've been able to generate with Neo4j. Incredible group of people. I think some of the things that have happened in the last several months have really delivered a lot of value. I think some of the partnerships that you guys have chased and really established with the cloud service provider cohort really enable us to maintain some platform agnostic approach and how we're really attacking the market. And so for us, it was a combination of the technical capabilities, I think the brand, the relationships that we get from it, and ultimately what that means for us to build transparent, trustable AI solutions that are not only powerful, but have real reliability and explainability behind them. And I think it's that marriage between these things where the real value starts to be created.